What would you do if the only person who refused to give up on your missing child was a dusty cowboy riding an old half-lame horse? When Lena vanished into the deadly red canyons of the Badlands, every search team pulled back. Every expert said the same thing: no one survives a night out there. But then a quiet cowboy stepped out of the fading light, rested a hand on his horse's neck, and told the young native mother,
"My horse can find your daughter."
Everyone laughed. Everyone thought he was crazy. Until the horse took one step into the forbidden desert, and the ground itself seemed to answer. Stay with me, because what happened next is something even the desert had not witnessed in generations. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. This is the kind of story the wind remembers, even when people forget. The morning Lena disappeared began like every other rushed weekday in Dry Creek. Maya Redfeather parked her dusty pickup at the turnout where the school bus always stopped and the sky still washed in pale blue and pink behind the jagged silhouette of Red Mesa. Lena bounced out of the truck with her backpack, half-zipped shoes, dusty from yesterday's game's hair in a braid. Maya had finished one-handed at a red light. "Stay where I can see you," Maya called, locking the doors. "I know, Mom." Lena laughed, already drifting a little up the dirt path to where the pavement met the first tongues of red sand. There were always a few kids there, but today the turnout was empty. Just the crooked sign, the sagging fence, the wide, breathing emptiness of the Badlands beyond. Maya bent back into the cab to grab Lena's lunchbox. A gust of wind slammed the truck door against her hip, hard enough to make her gasp. The next thing she heard was a short, sharp sound, half yelp, half breath, cut off too quickly to be a joke. She spun around. Lena. The turnout was empty. The dirt path, the fence line, the faint track that led toward the first sandstone ridges, nothing. No flash of a purple backpack, no small shape crouched in the grass. Just red dust still swirling in the wake of that strange, hard gust. Lena. Her voice cracked the second time. She dropped the lunchbox without realizing it, started running along the fence, scanning the shallow ditch at the culvert under the road and the brush. Nothing. Panic snapped through her chest like wire. Her fingers fumbled with her phone. 911. My daughter, she's gone. She was just here. She was just here. By the time the first patrol car rolled up, dust plume trailing behind it, Maya had already run the length of the turnout twice, boots slipping in loose sand. An officer tried to get her to slow down, to repeat everything clearly, but her answers came in broken pieces. She was right there. I heard something. No, I didn't see a car. No, she would never run into the Badlands. She knows better. They followed the faint path that led toward the red country, a narrow scar between scrub and rock. There were no drag marks, no obvious prints, just wind and sand, and the vast, indifferent face of the desert staring back. By mid-morning, the sky was full of sound. Helicopters thudded overhead, their rotors chopping the hot air as they swept low over the scalloped ridges. Sheriff's trucks, search and rescue rigs, and an ambulance crowded the turnout tires, digging deep into the soft shoulder. Yellow tape went up. Radios crackled. Men and women in bright vests moved with clipped efficiency, calling to each other over the wind. They brought in K9 units from the neighboring county. The dogs leapt eagerly from their crates' noses to the dirt tails high. For the first few hundred yards, they pulled hard along the path, noses working. Then one by one, their confidence faltered. The wind shifted, veering around the rock spurs like water. The dogs whined, circling, losing whatever thread they'd caught. "Try the gully," someone shouted. "Check the drainage cut." A drone buzzed high above Lens, sweeping, searching for the bright punctuation of a small human body against the red and tan. It saw only heat mirages, stone, and the long, cracked veins of dry washes. Every time a voice on the radio rose in pitch, Maya's heart jumped. Every time it ended with negative. Something inside her sank a little further. Wind crawled over the ground all day, pushing sand into every footprint almost as soon as it was made. The few prints they'd marked earlier blurred, then vanished. A deputy stood beside her, watching the dust move. "This place," he muttered under his breath, "this place doesn't hold on to anything." By noon, the sun was punishing, beating down off the rock faces, heat shimmering in waves. The lead search coordinator ordered the ground teams back to the staging area for water and shade. Maya didn't feel the heat. She only felt the cold. By afternoon, it was as if the morning had never happened. The flagging tape that had gone up around faint depressions and possible tracks now fluttered uselessly above smooth sand. The stakes marking last known prints leaned at odd angles or lay flat, knocked over by gusts. A roadside sign that had been pointing toward the state highway was now twisted, its arrow pointing nowhere. They pulled stills from the helicopter's camera, grainy images of the ridges and ravines zoomed and zoomed again until the pixels bled. Every frame showed the same thing, stone shadow and fractures. No bright jacket, no small form huddled by a rock. The lead search officer took off his hat and scrubbed a hand over his short hair, eyes hollow. "There's no trail left to follow," he said quietly. The desert wiped it clean. A few steps away, an older native man from town stood with his arms crossed, eyes on the red horizon. "Red Mesa takes back what it wants," he murmured, not quite to anyone. Maya heard him anyway. It felt like the ground had tilted underneath her. Inside the medic tent, the air smelled of antiseptic and sweat. "Mrs. Redfeather," a young deputy said gently, "we need your signature on this. It's just a procedural form, too." She stared at the paper. "Change the operation from rescue to recovery," the block letters read. "High probability of fatality due to exposure." Her hand shook so hard she couldn't even grip the pen properly. "No," she said. "She's not dead." Her voice was hoarse from hours of shouting Lena's name into the wind. "You don't get to put that on a form. She's 9. She's just 9. The on-call doctor from the clinic stepped in, face lined with both fatigue and worry. "Ma'am," he said, "by tonight, it'll drop close to freezing out there. If she doesn't have shelter, then we find her before then." Maya snapped, slamming her palm down on the folding table hard enough to rattle the clipboard. "We keep looking." A volunteer put a tentative hand on her shoulder. "If she's still alive," the woman said softly, "she must have found some kind of cover. Kids are tougher than they look." Maya pulled away. She didn't want comfort. She wanted footprints. A direction. Any direction. By late afternoon, the turnout looked less like a rescue scene and more like a spectacle. People from Dry Creek stood behind the tapes and makeshift barriers, arms, folded faces shadowed by caps and sunglasses. Truck doors stayed open, engines idling, radios turned down low. "No kid lasts a first night in the Badlands," someone muttered near the back. "The desert swallowed her," said another, shaking his head. They said it matter-of-factly, as if repeating a weather report. No one stepped past the edge of the red soil. The line where gray roadside gravel gave way to rust-colored sand might as well have been a cliff. Maya stood on the wrong side of every line, inside the tape, outside any sense of protection, surrounded by uniforms and high-vis vests and the murmur of voices. She had never felt more completely alone. The first sign of him was the sound. Hoofbeats slow and steady, echoing off the stone as the sun leaned toward the horizon. Heads turned automatically toward the hills. A rider appeared along the ridgeline, horse and man outlined in burning orange for one suspended moment, like a cutout from an older, harsher century. He came down the slope as if he had all the time in the world. The cowboy was lanky clothes, dust-stained and sun-faded hat, pulled low over a weathered face. He rode a big gray horse with one hip dipped slightly, the kind of old injury that left a permanent hitch in its gait. As they drew closer, Maya could see the horse's eyes, dark calm, watching everything. One of the deputies stepped forward, palm up. "Sir, this area is closed. You can't be here." The rider didn't answer right away. He swung down from the saddle boots, hitting dirt with the weight of someone used to standing on ground that fought him for balance. He walked a few paces past, the officer squatted by a patch of trampled grass outside the taped perimeter. His fingers brushed a blade bent in the wrong direction, something no one else had considered worth noticing. The horse Dustwalker, though no one knew his name, yet pawed at the sand, with the edge of one hoof as if testing the skin of the earth. It was the way he looked at her that made Maya's breath catch. He straightened from the grass and turned to face her through the tangle of uniforms and tape. For a moment, the world narrowed to the space between them, and the young mother whose voice had gone raw, calling for a child the desert refused to answer for, and the stranger who had ridden in from the empty places as if summoned. He took off his hat just enough to be polite, then set it back on. "My horse can find your daughter," he said. The words fell into the silence like something heavy. No one spoke for a few heartbeats. Then a patrolman barked out a disbelieving laugh. "A horse," he scoffed. "Our K9 teams couldn't pick up a thing out there. But your old nag's gonna do better." Another searcher snorted. "This is a crime scene, not a rodeo, cowboy." Heat flared in Maya's chest, hope or anger she couldn't tell. She stared at the man. "Who are you?" she asked. "Ethan Cole," he said simply. "I work the North Range. I know this ground." "That's enough," the incident commander cut in voice hard. "Mr. Cole, you're a civilian. This is an active investigation. You need to clear the area." The commander moved closer, lowering his voice in that controlled, strained way Maya had come to recognize over the last hours. "This is a search zone," he repeated. "You and your horse will contaminate the scene." Ethan's gaze flicked to the smooth, spotless sand where flags still fluttered above tracks that no longer existed. Then he looked back at the man. "There's no scene left to contaminate?" he said, not unkindly. "Whatever trail there was, the wind's already taken." The officer's jaw tightened. "That's not your call." Ethan didn't argue. He just picked up Dustwalker's reins as if he were about to leave. Instead of heading back toward the road, though, the horse stepped up onto a low boulder, iron shoes scraping stone, and turned his head toward the jagged mouth of the badlands. The movement was so deliberate that a few people actually fell quiet. Then someone near the tape chuckled. Another joined in a bitter, nervous sound. "Look at that," a man drawled. "Even the horse wants to go play mountain hero." Maya watched Dustwalker's ears flick forward, every line of his body oriented toward the red maze beyond. Inside her, two forces pulled in opposite directions. One was the cold, clinical voice she'd been hearing all day: statistics, exposure rates, survival odds. The other was something older and quieter, a faint echo of stories her grandmother used to tell about the land, about animals that knew more than humans ever could. She took a half step toward Ethan, then stopped. Her fingers dug into her palms until her nails bit skin. Hope, she thought, is the cruelest thing. If you were Maya, would you trust the police and their rules? Or a quiet cowboy and an old horse everyone laughed at? Tell us what you would choose in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe, because the next part of this story changes everything. Night changed everything. By the time the last chopper peeled away and the final search truck rolled off toward town, its taillights dwindling into two red pinpricks, the turnout had emptied of noise. The wind had cooled, carrying with it the scent of sage and dust instead of hot metal and sweat. A tired deputy offered to drive Maya back to Dry Creek. "We'll regroup in the morning," he said. "Fresh teams, fresh eyes." She stared out toward the dark line of red mesa, now just a deeper shadow against the star-salted sky. "You go," she said. "I'm not leaving her." He hesitated, then handed her a bottle of water and left it at that. One by one, engines turned over, headlights swept the ground, and then the last vehicle disappeared down the road. The sudden quiet rang in her ears. For a moment, Maya just stood there alone in the fading wash of the temporary floodlights. The badlands loomed black and endless. The wind picked up, rustling through the low shrubs along the fence. The sound made her knees wobble. She sucked in a sharp breath and forced herself to move. Up on a low rise above the road, a single lantern glowed like a small, stubborn star. Maya stumbled toward it. "Are you still there?" she called, voice cracking. Ethan Cole sat on an overturned crate beside a small camp lantern dustwalker dozing behind him, with one hind foot cocked, head lowered, but ears still alert. Ethan hadn't unrolled his bedroll. He looked like he hadn't intended to sleep at all. When he saw her, he rose slowly. "I don't have anyone left who believes she's alive," Maya said. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "Not the sheriff, not the doctor, not the others in town. I'm down to you and a horse." Her laugh was brittle and broke halfway through. Ethan didn't rush to fill the silence. He let it sit between them, solid as rock. "Are you sure you want to go with me?" he asked at last. "I can't promise you anything." Maya swallowed. Her throat felt scraped raw. "I don't need promises," she said. "I just need a direction. I'll go anywhere if it leads to her." He nodded once, as if that was the answer he'd been waiting for. "Take this," he said, handing her a canteen and a faded bandana. "Tie that over your mouth when the wind kicks up. The sand'll cut your lungs if you let it." Dustwalker lowered his big head until his muzzle was level with Maya's shoulder. His breath was warm, smelling of hay and dust. For a second, she had the uncanny sensation that he was weighing her, deciding something about her that she couldn't yet see in herself. Then he snorted softly, as if in acceptance. They started where everyone else had started, at the flagged corridor the search teams had carved into the edge of the badlands. Glow sticks still hung from a few stakes, their weak light turning the sand sickly green. Reflective tape winked across the dark like fragments of a broken road. "Shouldn't we follow their markers?" Maya asked, hugging her borrowed scarf tighter around her neck. "Let's ask him," Ethan said. He clucked his tongue and nudged Dustwalker forward. The horse took 2 steps toward the corridor and then stopped dead. His whole body went rigid. He snorted, head-tossing, then turned sharply away, hooves digging against the sand as if refusing to be led. Ethan gave the reins a mild tug. "Easy, old man, just a look." Dustwalker planted himself, muscles bunched. He drove one hoof into the earth with a force that vibrated up through Maya's boots. "What's wrong with him?" she asked, alarmed. "He doesn't go," Ethan said quietly, where the ground's gone silent. The wind gusted from the direction the teams had scoured all day. It brought with it a stew of smells: hot metal, spilled fuel, the acrid tang of exhaust, and human sweat. Beneath all that, there was nothing. No trace of small, familiar scent to follow. Dustwalker backed up 3 steps, ears pinned for an instant, then shook his head in a sharp, decisive movement. Every line of his body said no. Instead, he turned toward the darker section of the horizon, a stretch of country marked on state maps with a blank space and a thin warning line. Red Mesa proper, closed for geological instability, sacred ground to Maya's people. "No one goes into that part at night," she whispered. We were told to stay out when I was a kid. He's not picking a time, Ethan said. He's picking a path. Dustwalker started forward away from mankind's little flags and dirt roads and into the real maze. The first hour was an exercise in surrender. Maya found herself asking questions just to quiet the fear chewing at her from the inside. "How do you control him?" she asked, trudging alongside. The sand shifted under her boots. She grabbed the stirrup once to steady herself. Ethan, walking on Dustwalker's other side, shook his head. "I don't," he said. "I give him his head and he follows the lines under the sand." "You mean he senses something?" "Horses notice things we ignore," Ethan said. "The way the wind presses, the way the ground vibrates, where the sand's been broken and where it hasn't. He feels where life's passed through and where it hasn't." Maya hugged her arms around herself. "And if she couldn't force the word out. If she's still breathing," Ethan finished for her, "the ground's still holding on to that. Just a little. Long enough." It wasn't science. It wasn't statistics. But it was the first explanation she'd heard all day that didn't feel like a eulogy. Dustwalker stopped so abruptly that Maya almost walked into his shoulder. He lowered his head to a patch of scrub that, at first glance, looked like all the others. Ethan crouched, held his lantern low. A single blade of grass had been twisted against the direction of the wind looped once around its neighbor. It was a tiny thing so small the searcher's big boots would have crushed it without seeing. "That's not natural," Maya said slowly. "Looks deliberate to me," Ethan agreed. Maya's chest tightened. She was suddenly back on a different trail years ago, her mother's hand on her shoulder, showing her how to knot grass to mark a safe way around a wash, how to leave a quiet sign for those who came after. "I used to do this with her," she whispered, "on hikes. My mom would say, 'If you ever get lost, make the plants talk for you.'" She was listening, Ethan said. "Your girl." She was listening. He straightened. "She's leaving us a trail. She's thinking clearly. That matters." For the first time since morning, the air around Maya felt less like a noose and more like a held breath. A few dozen yards later, Dustwalker paused again. This time, it wasn't grass, but stone. 3 small rocks rested on the hardpan, placed just so curved into the shape of a horseshoe. Maya's knees almost gave out. "That's a hoof," she said. She made a hoof. Ethan smiled faintly in the lantern light. "She knows someone's coming for her on 4 legs," he said. "That's a smart kid." A breeze slipped through the little arrangement and made the stones click softly together, a sound like a quiet acknowledgement. Maya knelt, fingertips brushing their warm surfaces. The memory came back so sharply, it almost hurt her grandmother Ione sitting on the steps of the old house, arranging pebbles in arcs and spirals. When you're lost, Ione had told her, draw the step of a spirit animal. The land remembers its own. Mama Maya whispered now, though her grandmother was miles away. She was watching you. She was watching both of us. Where did she learn to do that? Ethan asked gently. Maya kept her eyes on the stones. From my grandmother, she said. Ione. She used to tell stories about reading the desert. I stopped listening. I thought Lena didn't care either. She let out a shaky breath. I left all that behind. I moved into town, worked double shifts, didn't go back to ceremony, didn't teach her the signs. I thought the world didn't need old things anymore. And now the only thing keeping her alive is the one thing I chose to forget. Tears hit the packed red earth, darkening it in small, perfect circles. Ethan shifted his weight boots, crunching softly. Kids remember what their heart needs, he said quietly, not what we decide to throw away. Behind him, Dustwalker blew out a low, almost musical breath and tipped his head toward the deeper darkness ahead, as if to say the way is still there. Keep moving. Maya wiped her face with the back of her hand. Then she stood up, turned her back on the flags and roads and certainty, and followed the horse into the land that had once belonged to her people, and still in its own wordless way remembered her child. Night in Red Mesa was different from night anywhere else, a living thing of force with moods and patterns and breaths of its own. As darkness spread across the ridges like ink poured over stone, Maya felt the air shift. The wind, which had been a steady whisper earlier that evening, suddenly changed tempo, direction, and temperature with no warning at all. It didn't feel random. It felt intentional. A gust slammed into her from the left, then two from the front, then one swirling behind her, as if something massive was circling unseen. Dust curled around her boots in spiraling ribbons. Even the horse sensed it. Dustwalker lifted his head sharply every time a gust cut through the canyoneers, twitching muscles rippling beneath his gray coat. Maya pulled her jacket tighter. "Is it usually like this at night?" "No," Ethan said, scanning the sky. "Not unless the land's trying to warn you off or guide you somewhere." The phrase sent a shiver down her spine. She dug inside her search kit and pulled out a small compass. The needle spun once, twice, then jittered uselessly, refusing to orient itself. "Great," she muttered. "Even the compass is broken." Ethan checked his phone. No signal, not even a flicker. "This area isn't a dead zone," Maya insisted. "I've hiked here before. There's reception." "Not tonight," he said. "The ground doesn't want us using anything man-made." She blinked. The ground doesn't what? But Ethan wasn't joking. He tilted his chin toward Dustwalker. He feels the pull. When the land's like this, the old ways work. The modern ones don't. Maya felt the weight of the darkness pressing closer, but she didn't argue. Not anymore. Not after the trail of grass knots, the stones shaped into a hoof print, the signs her daughter had somehow remembered from a culture Maya herself had let slip through her fingers. Something was happening out here. Something she couldn't explain with logic or maps or GPS, but Dustwalker kept walking with steady certainty, like there was a string tied from his chest to something deep in the earth, pulling him onward. And they followed. The last traces of human presence disappeared within minutes. No more search flags. No more flattened patches of sand from heavy boots. Only the narrow, winding path the horse chose, one that wasn't on any map Maya had ever seen. "This isn't a trail," she said, ducking under a low jut of rock. "There's nothing here. No footprints, no deer tracks, nothing." "Doesn't have to be on your map," Ethan said. "The best paths never are." They squeezed through a slit between two massive slabs of sandstone, barely wide enough for a grown man. Dustwalker turned sideways, ribs brushing each wall. The moon cast silver bars of light across the canyon floor, revealing the darkened stone in layers of deep red and purple. The walls rose higher with every step, the sky shrinking above them, until it felt like they were walking through the throat of some ancient creature. Once Dustwalker stopped so abruptly that his tail swished into Maya's legs. "What now?" she whispered. Ethan tilted his lantern downward. The horse's hooves were almost touching the lip of a narrow drop, a dry fracture in the stone, barely visible in the moonlight. "He heard it," Ethan murmured. "The echo's wrong on this rock." Dustwalker turned left. He wasn't guessing, he was listening. Maya realized suddenly that she was holding her breath. It felt like they weren't just traveling through the desert, they were being let in. As if the land were deciding piece by piece that they were worthy of walking deeper. And then, just as she began to relax into the rhythm of the horse's pace, The canyon opened up into a flat stretch of untouched sand, perfectly smooth, as if no wind had ever blown here. Dustwalker tensed. "What is it?" Maya asked. Ethan slid off the saddle without answering and lowered the lantern. "Look." There, barely visible, was a small, crescent-shaped indentation in the sand. A hoof print. A small one. "Lena?" Maya whispered, her throat tightening. The edges of the print were sharp. 2 hours old, if that, Ethan said. Maybe less. But when they walked a few steps forward, the tracks vanished, completely wiped clean, as though someone had swept the sand behind them. "That's impossible," Maya said. "There's no wind here." It wasn't the wind. Maya turned toward him, then who Ethan didn't answer. He knelt, scooped a handful of sand, and let it fall slowly through his fingers. Someone erased it. On purpose. A cold spike of fear slid into her ribs. Dustwalker lowered his muzzle and inhaled deeply. A heavy breath. Then another. His ears flicked backward, then forward. He snorted once sharply. "He's got something," Ethan whispered. "It's Lena's scent." "No." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "He's tracking whoever went after her." They climbed toward a ridge shaped like a broken tooth. Below it, half hidden beneath the shadow of a rock outcrop, Maya spotted a glint. She moved toward it, feeling the cold instinct of dread blooming in her chest. It wasn't a natural reflection. It was the shine of cheap plastic. She bent and picked it up, a piece of black nylon cord, thick enough to bind someone's wrists. Her fingers trembled. "Ethan," she whispered. "Someone tied her." He stepped up beside her, taking the cord to examine it. Heavy duty, industrial. And this? Maya reached for another scrap lying partly buried in sand, a plastic water bottle with a faded industrial label, the kind used at remote work sites. A streak of mud smeared the side, a partial print of a man's fingers, not a child's. Ethan swept the lantern across the ground and stopped at a pair of deep ruts carved into the sand. Tire tracks, but not ordinary ones, deep, uneven swerving. "Weighted down," he said, and turning off the road to hide the trail. Maya covered her mouth. They took her. Someone took her. Ethan stood up slowly, jaw tightening. Not just took her. They're taking her somewhere no one's supposed to go. Where he pointed toward the horizon, where the ridges formed a dark, jagged crown. Black Ridge. Maya's stomach dropped. No one goes near Black Ridge. Not locals, not rangers. No one. That's because someone doesn't want them to. They crested another rise and froze. A bluish-green strobe pulsed against the underside of the rocks, an unnatural industrial glow that didn't belong in the desert. "What is that?" Maya breathed. "Not something legal," Ethan muttered. They climbed higher and found a small ledge overlooking a hidden valley. What Maya saw below stole the air from her lungs. The entire basin had been carved open, tiered pits, drilled shafts, heavy machinery generators buzzing loudly enough to shake dust off the rocks. Floodlights painted the whole valley in harsh white beams. A mining operation. One that didn't exist on any map. This, Maya whispered, struggling to process it. This wasn't approved. No one in the tribe authorized this. No one in the county either. Because they didn't tell anyone, Ethan said grimly. This is rare earth extraction. High value, illegal as hell. Dustwalker stepped backward, hoof striking rocks sharply. He hated being near it. So they found Lena Maya, whispered voice cracking. They brought her here to hide her, to keep her silent, because she saw something. Ethan nodded once, slow and grim. Not for ransom, not for revenge. They grabbed her because she was a witness. Below them, 3 men with rifles patrolled along a fence lined with motion sensors. A large tent hummed with the sound of generators. Farther back, A tunnel mouth gaped open like a wound tracks leading into the darkness. Maya pictured her daughter's small, unarmed, terrified running through this valley, trying to disappear from men with flashlights and guns, and somehow still leaving signs behind for them to follow. "Look there," Ethan whispered. Near the mouth of the tunnel, faint and fragile, were 3 small rocks, curved into a hoof shape. She had made it this far. She had escaped the vehicle. She had fought. Maya felt her chest split open with both pride and terror. "Okay," Ethan said quietly. "We don't move closer tonight. Too many floodlights, too many guns. So what do? We wait. And we trust the dark." They retreated into a narrow crack in the canyon wall, a small alcove sheltered from the wind. Dustwalker folded his legs and lay across the entrance, blocking the view from outside with his massive frame. Maya had never felt so grateful for an animal in her life. Ethan lit a tiny camp stove, the flame barely visible. He heated 2 cups of water and handed one to her. The steam helped loosen her lungs from the tight knot of fear. Neither of them spoke much. They didn't need to. The valley below them kept humming with machinery, a reminder of what Lena had stumbled into. After a long silence, Maya exhaled shakily. "I need to call my grandmother." Ethan raised a brow. "You think you'll get signal now? I don't know. But I need her." She stepped to the edge of the alcove, held up her phone, and prayed. 1 bar blinked into existence, faint but real. She dialed immediately. Her grandmother picked up on the second ring. "You found something," Ione said. Her voice was steady, but Maya could hear the urgency beneath it. "Yes," Maya breathed. "A mine. Illegal. Men with guns. And signs." Signs, Lena left. Grass knots, rocks shaped like a hoof. There was a brief pause. "Ah," Ione whispered. "The old ways." "What do you mean?" "She's walking the horse trail," Ione said. "The one our people used long before fences and borders. The one the land still remembers. The horse trail? It's not on maps," Ione continued. "But it's written into the ground, into the stone, into the living rock. Your girl is striking the right chords. She's waking the memory of the desert." Ethan, hearing that last part, turned his head sharply. "Ask her," he said softly. "Ask her about the stone." Maya relayed the question. "Look for living stone," Ione said. "The ones that ring hollow when struck. The ancestors used them as markers." Maya swallowed. "Grandma, do you think Lena's still alive?" Another pause. "If the earth is still guiding you," Ione said, "it means the child has not given up." Tears stung Maya's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "Follow the horse." Her grandmother said simply, "He knows the old music." When Maya hung up, the wind seemed warmer, softer, like the land itself had turned its face toward them instead of away. She touched the side of the canyon wall. The stone felt warmer than it should have, like it held breath. "She's alive," she whispered. Ethan nodded as if he had known all along. "She's fighting. You can feel it." "No," Maya said, looking at Dustwalker still standing guard, still facing the valley. "She's not fighting alone." The horse's ears pricked forward as if he understood. For the first time since the morning, since that impossible shattering moment when the wind screamed and her child vanished, Maya felt something she hadn't dared let herself feel. Hope, real, solid, alive, carried to her by the desert itself, through stone, through wind, through an old gray horse who remembered paths humans had forgotten, and through a little girl who refused to be lost. Dawn broke slowly over Red Mesa, bleeding into the sky in streaks of rust red and pale gold. The desert looked calm, calmer than anything that had happened to Maya and Ethan in the past 24 hours. but the stillness carried an undercurrent of danger, like the land was holding its breath. Ethan tightened the strap on his gloves as Dustwalker led them toward a wide shelf of sandstone that stretched out like a giant flat mirror. The rock's surface gleamed faintly beneath layers of red dust. "Easy, boy," Ethan murmured. Dustwalker lowered his head, sniffed, and took 3 slow steps forward. Something dark smudged the stone. Ethan crouched immediately. "Maya," he said quietly. "Look at this." Thin streaks of black ash clung to the rock, delicate, deliberate, not spread by wind. Maya knelt beside him. When she rubbed her fingers across the soot, it came off smooth and oily, not rough like wildfire residue. Controlled fire, a signal. Her breath caught. "This is how my grandmother taught us to mark direction at night. Low flame, barely any smoke, so no one else sees it," Ethan added. She stared at the faint burn marks, her throat tightening. Lena remembered. She actually remembered. Dustwalker snorted as if confirming it, and shook his mane lightly, his ears flicking toward the faint trail of ash. Someone small had been here. Someone who had survived the night. They pressed on. The stone shelf gave way to softer ground, a field of fine red sand that breathed with every gust of wind. They descended carefully, Dustwalker picking his steps with a precision Maya could not comprehend. "There," Maya whispered suddenly. Lines scratched into the sand, shallow, wavy, the shape of a little girl's hand dragging a stick. At first it looked like nothing but scribbles, but when she leaned closer, a pattern emerged, a small curved arch. A hoof. "Maya," Ethan murmured. She left this in the dark. And a direction line. Maya traced the straight mark Lena had drawn beside it. This is a warning. A guide. She's trying to show us where she went and where she didn't. "Smart kid," Ethan said softly. "Smart and brave." Maya pressed her palm to the sand for a heartbeat, imagining Lena kneeling here, shivering, trying to stay calm long enough to draw signs from lessons Maya thought she'd forgotten. Then Dustwalker froze. "Ethan," Maya whispered. The big gray horse had stiffened into a statue, nostrils flaring, muscles quivering. Slowly, he backed up 3 steps, hooves sliding in the sand. Ethan grabbed the lantern and scanned the ground. The light caught it immediately. A thin strip of steel wire stretched waist-high across the narrow passage ahead, almost invisible, buried under a dusting of sand. Sharp, taut, deadly. God, Maya breathed. If he hadn't stopped. Ethan touched the wire lightly. It vibrated with tension. "This isn't for animals. This is meant to take down people. Or a horse carrying someone. Someone set this," Maya said. "Someone who knew we'd follow." "There's more," Ethan muttered. He swept the light to the right. Another snare. Then farther down the canyon, another. 3 in total, forming a perfect triangle of death. "If we'd come through last night," Maya whispered, "we would have walked straight into this." Ethan nodded grimly. "Your daughter knew which path was safe. She dragged us away from the one adults picked." He rested a hand on Dustwalker's shoulder, and he's listening to her signs. Maya swallowed. "The land is protecting us." "No," Ethan said. "The land is protecting her. We're just lucky enough to be following." They squeezed through the narrow pass Dustwalker chose. The air smelled faintly metallic, like the desert's own warning. As they emerged into a slightly wider corridor between towering rock walls, a clink of metal echoed behind them. Ethan snapped around. 3 men stepped into view. Their faces were half covered with cloth masks. Mining gear hung from their belts, tools, ropes, knives, and each carried a handgun tucked loosely at their hip. Their headlamps cast harsh white beams across Ethan, Maya, and Dustwalker. "Well," Well, one of them sneered. Look what wandered into the wrong crack of earth. Maya instinctively backed against the rock wall. Dustwalker moved with her, placing his massive body between her and the men bearing his teeth. That's a fancy horse, another man said. Morton will want him. The third man tilted his head. Ethan Cole? Ethan didn't answer. I thought you were smart enough to stay out of trouble. The man grinned. Guess not. Footsteps scraped over stone. A fourth figure appeared. Caleb Morton stepped out of the shadows as if the desert had spit him out. His jacket was dusty but expensive. His boots polished his eyes flat like sun-baked stone. He walked with the arrogance of a man who thought the land, the men around him, and the very air belonged to him. Morning, Morton said casually. I see you've found our little operation. Ethan didn't move. A child is missing. Your men took her. Morton smirked. Children wander. It's regrettable. You're lying, Maya spat. You're covering what you did to her. Morton turned his gaze on her cold, amused, dismissive. Lady, the desert chooses who lives and dies out here. Not me, not you. You set traps, Ethan said. You covered tracks. You erased signs. You're terrified of being exposed. Morton shrugged. People die in deserts every year? Nothing new? His men laughed. Maya felt her fingernails dig into her palms. You're exploiting sacred land, poisoning water, stealing what isn't yours. Morton leaned closer, voice dripping with mock sympathy. This land belongs to whoever is strong enough to take it. And what about my daughter Maya demanded. You think the desert chose her too? Morton straightened. If a kid stumbled where she shouldn't have, that's nature. Ethan clenched his jaw. Nature didn't set those snares. Morton's smile widened. We all have our ways of keeping people out. Some places aren't meant for eyes. He raised a hand. His men cracked their knuckles. Let's escort our guests out, Morton said. One way or another. Dustwalker moved first. With a thunderous grunt, he lunged, slamming his shoulder into the nearest man's ribs. The impact threw the man into the rock wall so hard, he dropped his gun and crumpled. Run, Ethan shouted, grabbing Maya's wrist. Gunfire echoed instantly, ricocheting off the narrow stone walls in bursts of white sparks. They sprinted deeper into the canyon. Every step was dangerous, loose rocks shifting sand-jagged edges, but adrenaline carried them. The canyon forked ahead. Left, Ethan yelled. They dove into the left path, but footsteps pounded behind them. One of Morton's men was too fast, gaining on them with each stride. Maya grabbed a fist-sized rock and hurled it backward with all her strength. It struck the man square in the forehead. He stumbled, cursing, giving them precious seconds. Dustwalker appeared from nowhere, kicking a plume of sand into another pursuer's face, blinding him temporarily. They ran until their breath burned, until the canyon walls shook with the echo of gunshots. Ethan kept Maya close, shielding her from the bullets sparking off stone. Ethan, Maya gasped. Which way we follow him? Ethan pointed at Dustwalker. The big gray horse had taken the lead, weaving through the canyon with the instinct of something born from it. They followed every turn he took, trusting that he saw what they didn't. Another bullet whizzed past, lodging itself in a rock with a sharp, ugly sound. Morton, a voice screamed from behind. They're heading to the outer ridge. Morton's roar echoed. Don't let that horse get away. As if responding directly to Morton's fury, the desert wind surged. A howl ripped through the canyon, not an animal, not a weapon, but the desert itself awakening. Sand rose in thick spirals. A red curtain of dust swept across the passage, blinding every living thing. One of Morton's men coughed violently. I can't see, neither could Maya. Ethan grabbed her shoulders and pushed her against the canyon wall, shielding her with his body. Dustwalker planted himself in front of them, turning his massive flank into the storm, absorbing the biting sand. His mane whipped wildly around his head. Morton's voice carried faintly through the chaos. Who turned on the signal, shut it off? But no machine had caused this. The storm had risen on its own, almost as if the land had heard Lena's signs and was fighting for her. When the wind eased, visibility returned in fractured patches. Ethan wrapped the end of Dustwalker's reins around his wrist so tightly the leather bit into his skin. Easy, boy. Lead us, he whispered. Dustwalker stepped forward. No hesitation, no uncertainty. He moved like he was following a heartbeat buried beneath the sand. Maya stumbled alongside Ethan, coughing, shaking, but still moving. Every few seconds the wind shifted again, sweeping old tracks away and revealing new layers of the land. They traveled for nearly half an hour, guided entirely by the horse's instincts. The storm slowly faded behind them, swallowed by the canyon walls. Then a gunshot cracked the silence. Dustwalker lurched. "No," Ethan yelled. The horse collapsed onto one knee. Blood stained the sand beneath his hind leg, spreading like ink. Maya froze. "He's hit, Ethan, he's hit." Dustwalker tried to stand, but staggered his breath, coming in sharp, painful grunts. Behind them, silhouettes appeared at the mouth of the canyon, Morton's men advancing, weapons raised. "We're running out of time," Ethan said. "We can't stay here." Dustwalker pushed himself upright again, trembling. But when Morton's men stepped forward, the horse did something Maya would never forget. He moved to stand between her and the guns. A shield, a guardian, a wall of muscle and instinct and devotion. "No," Ethan whispered, eyes burning. "Don't do that, boy. Don't you dare." But Dustwalker didn't move. He faced the threat alone. Ethan grabbed Maya's arm. "We have to go. Now." "We can't leave him if we stay," Ethan said, voice cracking. "Your daughter dies. And Dustwalker's sacrifice means nothing." Maya's tears streamed hot and fierce down her cheeks. Dustwalker turned his head slightly, looking at her with one calm, steady eye, as if saying goodbye, as if saying run. Maya's knees buckled. Ethan pulled her behind a massive boulder. "Come on! Don't make his choice worthless." Morton's men began closing in their shadows, long and jagged across the sand. Ethan dragged Maya down a narrow fissure between boulders. Dustwalker stayed where he was, legs trembling, body squared, facing the danger. The last thing Maya heard before Ethan yanked her deeper into the darkness was the echo of gunfire, and Dustwalker's powerful, defiant huff like a final stand. A warrior's breath, a guardian's oath. And then the desert swallowed the sound. Ethan and Maya ran into the night, the storm rising again, sealing off the path behind them. Dustwalker stood alone, buying them time, buying them hope, buying Lena one more chance to live. The storm had scattered the world into red shadows and silence. Dustwalker's final stand still echoed in Maya's bones as she and Ethan pressed deeper into the maze of stone corridors. Every breath scraped her lungs. Every footstep felt borrowed. They did not speak. Neither of them dared to ask whether Dustwalker was still standing or whether he had already fallen beneath Morton's bullets. The desert wind carried no answers, only the faint hiss of sand, settling after violence. Ethan climbed first onto higher ground, offering his hand to Maya. She clutched Lena's small satchel found among the tire tracks earlier, as if it could anchor her sanity. The satchel smelled like sun-warmed cedar, like her daughter. "Come on," Ethan whispered. "We have to move before they regroup." Maya followed, stumbling, her legs numb with exhaustion and terror. The ridge rose steeply, a spine of blood-colored rock cutting through the dunes. From here, the land unfolded like an ancient mosaic, fractured canyons, shadowed alcoves, and dunes shaped like frozen waves. Then something subtle caught her eye. A line of small stones, each one the size of a coin, had rolled against a slanted patch of rock. All of them pointed the same direction, as though pushed, nudged, or guided. Maya knelt and lifted one. A whisper-thin smear of soot clung beneath it. "Ethan," she said, voice trembling, "it's her. She moved these." He crouched beside her, inspecting the underside of the stone. "Tro." Same as before. She burned a signal somewhere above this ridge, maybe last night. Maya lifted her gaze to the steep red slope ahead, where the wind-sculpted rock formations rose like the ribs of a great beast. The air felt heavier here. Older? This place? Maya breathed. "My grandmother used to tell me stories about it. Said our ancestors hid in these cliffs when soldiers came. She called it the Red Sanctuary, a place the desert kept for its own." Ethan studied the narrow opening ahead, an entrance swallowed in shadow. "Your daughter walked in there," he murmured. "A place even adults don't dare step into." Fear coiled inside Maya's chest, but there was no choice now. She followed him toward the darkness. The mouth of the crevice swallowed them in a single breath. Inside, the temperature dropped, the echo changed, and the walls rose vertically into vastness. Columns of stone formed, naturally towering like pillars carved by forgotten architects. Maya lifted her lantern and gasped. Symbols, spirals, lines, crescents spread across the stone walls in faded pigments. Some were so old she could barely see them, like memories etched into bone. Her grandmother's stories came rushing back. Spirals mean refuge. Lines mean silence. Crescents mean safe passage. "Oh God," she whispered. She remembered them. She remembered everything I forgot. Ethan traced a hand over one spiral, reverent. She didn't just remember, she used them. His voice echoed softly. "She's guiding us same way your ancestors guided each other." Before Maya could answer, a sharp gust sliced through the cavern. It carried a sound, a tiny one, a broken one, a child's sob. Maya froze. Her pulse slammed against her ribs. "Ethan, shh." He raised a hand, listened, tilted his head. Then he nodded slowly. "I hear it." The sobbing grew clearer when the wind shifted again, bouncing between the stone pillars. Maya's knees buckled. Emotion and terror collided in her chest so hard she couldn't breathe. Ethan steadied her. "Slow," he murmured. "We move slow. Morton's men were here first. They might have left more traps." She nodded, wiping her face with the back of her sleeve. "Let's go. Please, let's go." They rounded a bend in the cavern wall, and the passage suddenly opened into a shallow stone basin, a natural amphitheater worn smooth by centuries. In the center sat a rusted metal container. Its paint was eaten away by years of heat and sand. One door hung crooked on its hinges, the other was sealed shut with a crude chain and padlock. The sob came again, soft, terrified. "Mama." The world tilted around Maya. Her legs moved without thought. Ethan grabbed her arm, but she didn't stop. She fell to her knees beside the container, pressing her face against the cold steel. "Lena," she whispered, voice breaking. "Lena, baby, I'm here. I'm here." A faint scuffle sounded from inside. Mama, Ethan swung a heavy metal bar off his belt, a crowbar he'd grabbed from the abandoned machinery before the storm hit, and shoved it into the gap between chain and door. The metal groaned. The padlock snapped. The door swung open. A small body curled in the far corner, dusty, trembling, but alive. Maya cried out a noise deeper than language and rushed inside. She pulled Lena into her arms, sobbing into her hair, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, her hands. Lena clutched her fiercely, burying her face against Maya's chest. I thought you weren't coming," she whispered. "I will always come for you," Maya cried. "Always, to the ends of the world, baby. You hear me always." Ethan stood outside the door, his jaw clenched, eyes burning, not with fear anymore, but with anger and grief and relief tangled together. Dustwalker's absence weighed on him like a stone, but he didn't speak about it. They didn't have the time. And he didn't trust his voice. When Lena's trembling eased, Maya loosened her embrace enough to look her daughter in the eyes. "How did you survive?" she whispered. "How did you know what to do?" Lena sniffled and pointed to the entrance as if it were the simplest thing in the world. "Grandma said the earth remembers fire. Small fire. Safe fire. So I made dots. And I put stones for the horse. Horses hear better than people." Ethan blinked. You did all that on purpose?" Lena nodded. Maya pulled her in again, overwhelmed. You never forgot what I let go of." The guilt cut her like a blade, but mixed with pride so fierce it almost hurt. Outside the container, Ethan lifted several stones, each with a soot smear exactly the same as the ones they'd followed. "Kid," he whispered, shaking his head in awe, "you're something else." They barely made it 10 steps back toward the cavern entrance before a deep rumble rolled through the ground. Ethan froze. That sound. That's not good. Maya clutched Lena tighter. "What is it?" He looked toward the canyon mouth, eyes wide. Sandstorm. A wall of golden red sand taller than buildings devoured the horizon. It moved fast, too fast, like a living creature barreling straight toward them. "No," Ethan muttered. "Not now. Not now." The roar hit a second later, drowning thought. Lena screamed and buried her face into Maya's shoulder. Back, Ethan yelled over the rising wind. "Get deeper into the rock." He shoved them inward, pushing them beneath a natural overhang in the cavern wall. Maya threw a thick canvas tarp over all three of them, shielding Lena's head as the storm slammed into them with the force of a freight train. Sand stung their skin like needles. Pebbles ricocheted off the rock. The air howled, not like wind, but like thousands of voices layered atop each other. Maya held Lena's head tight against her chest. Ethan curled around them, bracing the tarp with his body. They stayed like that, 3 figures pressed into the earth while the desert screamed. Minutes, hours, time became a blur of sound and grit and trembling stone. And then silence. The storm fell away as suddenly as it had come, leaving only the soft hiss of settling sand. They waited another full minute before Ethan slowly unwrapped the tarp. The world outside had changed. Where the illegal mine had once spread across the valley, lights, machinery, fences, vehicles, there was nothing now. Nothing. Just an endless sea of fresh, untouched sand. Maya stared, stunned. It buried everything. "The desert," Ethan said quietly, "takes back what doesn't belong." He stepped forward, scanning the dunes. No lights, no metal, no tracks, no signs of human intrusion at all. It was as if the mining operation had never existed. Then he turned, and his face changed. The passage they had climbed to reach the sanctuary was gone, buried, erased. "Damn it," he muttered. He kicked at the sand. It swallowed his boot up to the ankle. The storm sealed the way out. Maya hugged Lena tighter. "Are we trapped? Not forever," Ethan said. "But until the desert decides to shift again?" "Yeah. We're staying put." Maya forced herself to breathe, forced herself to stay calm for Lena. But the desert wasn't finished. A ragged scream ripped through the stillness. Maya jerked her head up. A lone figure staggered along the ridge covered in dust, blood leaking down his arm, his steps uneven and desperate. Caleb Morton. His coat was shredded. His face was gray with shock. He turned in frantic circles looking for landmarks that no longer existed. "No," he gasped. "No, no, 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 this is mine. Give it back, give it back." He screamed into the wind as if challenging the sky. "Do you hear me? This land is mine." A gust answered, sharp, cold, merciless. Sand surged at his feet, pulling him sideways. He stumbled, shouting curses at the land, at the wind, at the invisible force that had undone him. Ethan stepped in front of Maya and Lena. "Stay behind me, Mama," Lena whispered. But their shelter was deep inside the stone. Morton was far across the ridge, thrashing against the dune as if fighting a phantom. The sand shifted again. A wave of it rolled down, knocking him off balance. He fell out of sight behind a rising crest. His scream cut off abruptly. A final gust blew across the alcove, and then nothing. Only silence. Only the desert. Maya pulled Lena close, whispering words of comfort, gratitude, and prayer into her daughter's hair. Ethan stared into the distance, jaw tight, knowing that whatever the desert had done with Morton, it was final. Not vengeance, not justice, but the land remembering, taking back what was stolen, erasing what should never have been. The desert quieted at dawn, as if exhausted by the violence of the storm it had unleashed. The sky slowly brightened into a dusty blue, and the air carried the metallic scent of lightning and sand. Ethan guided Maya and Lena along the newly carved corridor of dunes, each step sinking deep into the soft red grains. The storm had ripped open new paths, just as easily as it had buried the old ones, reshaping the land with an almost deliberate will. Lena clung to her mother's hand, still trembling from the night's terror. Her skin was cold despite the rising heat. Ethan kept close, scanning every ridge for movement, human or otherwise. He didn't know what they would find on the other side of the dune. He only knew they had no choice but to keep walking. Then suddenly, a faint sound split the silence. A weak, wavering whinny. Ethan stopped so abruptly that Maya nearly bumped into him. His head snapped toward the noise, hope flaring like a spark in dry brush. "Dust walker," he whispered. He broke into a run before Maya could respond. Lena cried out behind him, but he didn't slow. He crested the small dune, stumbled down the other side, and there he was. Dustwalker lay partially buried in the red sand, one flank exposed to the sun, and the rest swallowed by the aftermath of the storm. His coat was coated in dust, turning his usually gray body a rusty shade. Blood matted the fur along his hind leg, but he was breathing. And when Ethan fell to his knees beside him, Dustwalker flicked one ear. "Old friend?" Ethan choked, brushing sand from the horse's face. "I thought I lost you. I truly did." Dustwalker exhaled long and shaky and lifted his head an inch toward Lena's small silhouette on the dune. Lena slipped out of her mother's grasp and hurried forward despite Maya's instinctive attempt to hold her back. She approached Dustwalker slowly, respectfully, as though the horse were something sacred. Then she knelt and wrapped her arms gently around his neck. "Thank you," she whispered against his fur. "Thank you for listening, for finding the road, for helping Mama find me." Dustwalker closed his eyes, breathing out a soft, contented sound that felt almost like a nod. Maya pressed her fingers to her lips, tears running freely. The sight of her daughter alive, clinging to the horse that had nearly died to protect her, was almost too much to bear. Ethan placed a hand on Dustwalker's withers, steadying himself as if he too needed the horse's grounding presence. The desert wind blew softly across them, warm, now gentle like a blessing. News of the storm's destruction spread quickly once rescue teams dared return to the area. From the sky, helicopter images revealed nothing but dunes, smooth, untouched, endless. The illegal mining site, once crawling with machines, generators, and armed men, had vanished under meters of red sand. It was as though the land had decided the mine had never existed. Federal agencies swarmed Dry Creek within hours. Investigators arrived with clipboards and cameras. Trucks rolled along the outskirts of Red Mesa, interviewing residents, gathering evidence, asking questions no one in town had ever expected to hear. Morton's operation had been enormous, hidden, dangerous. And now it was gone. Those who had worked alongside him, drivers, technicians, hired guards, were detained for questioning. Shock waves rippled through the town. No one had imagined something illegal and massive could be happening practically under their noses. Dry Creek residents whispered on their porches, "Morton did all that right next to us. The land warned us, and we didn't listen." They said the desert swallowed the mine whole. Some spoke in fear, others in awe. But when reporters tried to shove microphones into Maya's hands, when news vans parked in front of her home asking about the miracle of Red Mesa, she gave only one answer. There was no miracle, she said quietly. Only a forgotten road. Every time they pushed for more, she closed the door. Some things were not for cameras. Some things belonged to the land. A week later, Maya stood before the tribal council. The long table formed a crescent, elders seated in silence as she placed a folded map on the wooden surface. "I want to return Red Mesa to the community," she said. "It saved my daughter. I cannot claim it as mine." The elders exchanged glances. They had known Maya since childhood, had watched her drift from tradition when she married, then drift further when life pulled her away from the community entirely. Now she stood straighter, stronger, changed by the desert's hand. The council voted unanimously. Red Mesa would be placed back under the guardianship of the tribe as it had been for centuries. After the meeting, Ione, Maya's grandmother, rested a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You remembered the truth, child," she said softly. "Land does not belong to us. But we may belong to it if we walk with respect." Maya closed her eyes, letting the words wash over her. This time, she didn't run from them. In the days that followed, Lena spent most of her time with Ione. The little girl learned the old signs again, how to twist grass in the direction of wind, how to place stones to mark safe paths, how to tell living rock from dead stone by tapping it with her knuckle. Like this, Ione instructed, tapping a pale stone. A hollow echo rang out. "That is living stone. It remembers." Lena nodded solemnly, repeating the motion. Maya watched from a distance, listening, absorbing, relearning. Something inside her felt like it was stitching itself back together, thread by thread. "The old paths never vanish," Ione said, smiling at Lena's quick progress. "They only wait for someone to remember them." Ethan didn't return to Dry Creek. He built a small wooden cabin at the base of Red Mesa, simple, sturdy, and close enough to see the canyon walls glow red at sunset. Dustwalker rested in a shaded corral nearby, his wounds healing slowly under Ethan's careful attention. "You're staying?" Maya asked one afternoon as she brought food and supplies. Her voice held no judgment, only quiet curiosity. Ethan nodded, scratching Dustwalker's neck. "He needs rest. The quiet helps. And I figure I owe this place something." Maya smiled faintly. "You owe it nothing. You saved my daughter." "No," he said gently. "Your daughter saved us." She didn't argue. Not about this. Weeks later, when the desert heat softened to a warm evening glow, Ethan invited Maya and Lena to walk a stretch of Red Mesa with him. Dustwalker, now stronger, led the way, his steps steady and sure. They followed a ridge that had once been blocked by sand. Now the dune had shifted again, revealing a narrow trail winding along the rock face. Dustwalker paused at the opening, sniffed the air, then stepped forward as though recognizing an old tune. "He remembers," Lena said, touching his mane. "No," Ethan replied softly. "Not remembers. He feels." Lena placed her hand on a living stone, tapping it lightly. The sound rang hollow, like the thump of a distant drum. Ethan smiled. They climbed higher the land, stretching beneath them in sweeping red waves. When they reached a flat plateau, Dustwalker stopped, lowering his head. Maya knelt beside him, one hand resting over her heart. The question lingered in her eyes. Earlier, she had asked Ethan quietly, how did he find her? How did he know? Now standing on the plateau where the wind hummed through the rocks, Ethan finally answered. "He didn't find your daughter," he said softly. Maya blinked. Then who did Ethan look toward the horizon, where the desert glowed like embers and the sky deepened into violet. "The land," he murmured. "Your ancestors. The old paths." He only followed what was already there. He placed a hand on Dustwalker's neck. "He walked the road your people walked long before maps, long before fences. A road we forgot. But he didn't." Lena slipped her hand into Maya's. For the first time since everything began, Maya felt something she hadn't known she was missing: peace. Complete, quiet peace. The desert wind touched her hair. Dustwalker breathed softly. And together, mother, daughter, cowboy, and horse stood on the ancient path that had once saved a people and had now saved a child. A road remembered, a road returned, a road waiting to be walked again. Thank you so much for staying with this story until the very end. If it moved you, inspired you, or simply kept you listening, don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel. Your support helps these stories continue to find their way to the world.